Hello everyone and welcome back. Again, this is a lesson for 8th grade. This is the scatter plots part 2, so make sure that you are in 8th grade and that you have watched the first part before getting to this one. So what we are doing right now is we are on example 2. Okay. Example 2 says describe the relationship between the data. Identify any outliers, gaps, or clusters. So describe the relationship between the data. That's the first part I want to work on right here. Okay. Then we'll move on to identifying your outliers, your gaps, or your clusters. Okay. So I'm actually going to extend myself here just a little bit because I forgot to put something very important on these slides. Okay. So describing this relationship, what we do in this describing your relationship is that we are looking at the different sets of data, okay? So we want to think back to when we were talking about lines and graphing lines, okay? What kind of slopes do they have? Are they positive? Are they negative? So that's kind of the first part. This is what I kind of have here. Whoop, I'll try my best to get it right in the spot. So we're thinking about, is it, sorry, this is the first one, okay? So is it a positive relationship? Remembering that's going from left to right, going upwards. Your negative's going down. It's like you're going down the hill, okay? Or sometimes it's going to be neither positive or negative, all right? So that's one thing. So let's take a look at the first one actually before those two. Before we get any further. So let's look if they're positive, negative, or if it's nothing, okay? So looking at this first one, what I can tell is that it is positive because for the most part, and if I was going to kind of try and connect them, it's going left to right. So in this case, I would say positive, okay? The second one here, though, looking at my data, it kind of goes upward, but it also goes down. So I would say it's neither. Okay, it looks very similar to this bottom one here, where it doesn't look like there's really any correlation. It kind of goes up, but it kind of goes down as well. So I'd say not positive, not negative. I'm going to abbreviate it here. Not pos, not negative, not neg. All right, so that was the first part, deciding are these graphs positive or are these graphs negative. All right. The next part I want to think about then is it linear or is it non-linear? Remember when we were talking about linear, usually it's going to be linear lines, straight lines. Non-linear ends up being things with curves. Now this is slightly different from what we had been doing before because nothing is going to create an officially straight line, okay? So what they usually call this then is an association. So it's similar to being linear or it's similar to being non-linear, okay? So that's what you can see it here on these ones, okay? So this first one over here is your non-linear, okay? So on this side, this is my non-linear data clusters, but not along a line. On this side, though, it is in a linear association. For the most part, it is going to be kind of going in the same direction. They're not necessarily going to line up and be able to use with a ruler, though, okay? And the bottom one here is just no association. Data does not appear to be related. It just kind of is scattered all around the graph. Okay. So let's take a look at those ones. I'm just going to put L or non-L or non-linear, okay? For this one, I would say, though, that this is linear. For the most part, it looks to be that it's kind of, if I could merge them just slightly a little bit more, it looks like it's going to form a line. So I would say this one is linear. Now in this one, it is a little more tricky. It's not officially a line. It doesn't just go one direction. It kind of goes back down. But it also doesn't really give me a nonlinear line. Okay, it doesn't just necessarily go in a curve like this. it's kind of still all over the place. So in this case, I would say that this graph is going to be your bottom one here, which is this non-association. Okay, so it's neither linear nor nonlinear. So again, I would say for this one, no association. All right. And the last part that we need to take a look at when we are describing the relationship between the data is we want to talk about, is it a weak association or is it a strong association? Okay. So when we're looking at associations here, your strong association means that that the clusters are close together, meaning that for the most part your data is very close together, it's nice and tight, okay? They're going to be going for the most part in the same direction, whether it's linear or nonlinear. My weak association then means that not clustered close together, but still recognized as a trend. So meaning that it still looks to be, like in this case, it looks to be on this one, it looks to be that it is a negative slope, okay? So it is still there, but it's just very weak. Oh, guess no one needed me exactly. And the last part here is kind of just going back to what we're going to be doing next, which is talking about outliers. Outliers, I think, are great. They kind of help. They actually end up kind of skewing your data, but they're really fun to identify because they're kind of the thing that like didn't follow the rest of the trend. They're just a little bit different. So outliers are a data point that doesn't seem to fit, okay? So for the most part, this is a linear association. It looks to be that it's, so like I said, it's a linear positive association. And it looks to be that it is a strong. But all of a sudden you get this one little guy over here who just doesn't want to join the rest of the group. All right? So we'll move on to talking about that in just a sec. So let's look at our data points and say, are they weak or are they strong? So in this one right here, in your first one, on this one, to be honest with you, mostly because of these that are going here, I would call this a strong association, okay? Because for the most part, it's all there. There's a few data points that are a little wrong, but that's about it. Okay. The second one, though, okay, looking at this, I would definitely call this weak, okay? Or I'd even say no association, okay? Because that's kind of what we were talking about here. But I would definitely call this one weak, okay? It's hard to tell what direction this is going. It doesn't necessarily just follow this curve that I created. It's kind of what the trend is. All right. So when we start looking at this one, I'm going to see if I can change my pen color here, or otherwise I will move on to a different part. Let's start talking about what are your outliers, your gaps, and your clusters. So for my outliers, let's look at this one. I'm going to try and make this red. Okay, there we go. So those outliers were those ones that I was talking about that just don't seem to follow the trend as everyone else. Okay. Now I kind of created this line that seems to be going like this, but I could have even created this line and gone a little steeper. Okay. The dot here that I can tell that seems to be an outlier and it doesn't follow the rest of the pack is this guy right here. Okay. So one way when I was doing this last year to identify your outliers is that you can circle them or you can tell me, hey, outlier is at 70 and 2,250. Okay, so telling me that coordinate point that goes with that outlier. On this one, now, it is hard to identify outliers on a weak or a non-associated graph, okay? So in this case, I'm going to say there is no outliers because it's really hard to tell. I don't know, would this be the outlier? Would this be the outlier? It's hard to tell because it's so spread out and there's no association with it. So I'm just going to say no outliers for this one, Okay. Let's go ahead. I'm going to change my pen color. So let's do green for my gaps. Okay. Thinking back to what gaps are just spaces. Okay. So there's this big gap, like big gap in your line. Okay. There's going to be a big space in between the data amount. In this case, in this first one, your gap here, ooh, it didn't really move. Okay, my gap would probably just become right about here, because I'm not seeing anything happening in between these datas. Not sure why this keeps doing it. Okay. Over here, there's a little bit of gap, but it's not as big as down here when these ones were really pushed together. Okay. Over on this one, there are some gaps, but again, it's such a weak association, and I can't tell what's really going on with this graph, so I'm not really going to identify any gaps, okay, because it's just so spread out. All right, and then let's go ahead, and I'm going to go to the next one. I think what's happening is I'm taking the wrong kind of pen. Oh, let's make this one purple. So let's do our clusters as purple. Okay. So when I'm taking a look, clusters. Now clusters are kind of like a big grouping, okay? So it's like everyone is right next to each other. It's like a cluster of people or a cluster of data. They're all going to be kind of maybe on top of each other, right next to each other. They're going to be very close. So when I take a look at this data, I can tell that there's a cluster here, as well as there seems to be about a cluster here. Okay, they're very close together. That's what your clusters are going to be. And again, when we take a look at this part B one here, I don't really know. The only clusters in this case I would actually identify clusters are these two that are kind of right next to each other and these two that are right next to each other. Okay. So again, when you have no positive, no negative, no association, when it's weak, it is a lot harder to identify those outliers, those gaps, or those clusters. Sometimes you may only have one or two of each thing, okay? When things are a little more stronger, okay, they show a clearer, more association, whether it's positive or negative, or if it's linear or nonlinear, and it's a little clearer to see, it's a lot easier to identify those outliers. Okay, remember your outliers are the ones who just kind of don't want to follow the rest of the pack. They want to be different. Okay, your gaps, those spaces in between, and those clusters, where are all those data next to each other? All right, again, feel free to pause the video at any point if you want to double check some of your work here. I'll move myself up here so you can see these graphs again a little better. Okay, I'm going to keep moving forward. So the next one here on your own, this one they want you to make this scatter plot of the data and describe the relationship, okay? Exercise 10 through 12 between the data, identify any outliers or gaps. So set up a data, okay, set up with using all your data and create this scatter plot. Try and relate it back to what we were just doing. Is it strong? Is it weak? Okay, is it linear? Is it non-linear? Is it positive? Is it negative? Do you see these outliers, these gaps, or these clusters? I'll come back here just in a second, so go ahead, pause the video, try and figure out what is setting this up. Start the video again when you want to see my answers. Hello, welcome back. I'm going to make this a little bigger just because I use graph paper to set off this graph. Here is my graph, and again, I will try my best to kind of explain this. So here is my graph. What I did for my y-axis over here was that I skipped, and then I went up by increments of 2 from 60. And my y-axis, I went up by increments of 10, okay? When I take a look at this data here, I can tell that it's linear, it's positive, and for the most part, I would say this is a strong association, okay? You can see that I identified my gaps, my clusters, and my outliers as well, okay? Again, let me know if you've got any questions about this, but this one's definitely kind of my outlier here. He's kind of doing his own thing. These ones are very close as a cluster, and I've got a gap over there as well, okay? All right, last part here is just kind of your normal page, finalizing page. For right now, we're not really going to worry about workbook. If you want to do it, you can. You're more than welcome to. But your homework that I'm going to look for is this 9.1 on big ideas to get done. Okay? Should have found that in your packet as well. Let me know if you got questions. Bye.